Welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVM LP Asheville 103.7, streaming online, WPVMFM.org. The voice of Asheville heard all over the world and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song. WalterParks.com for more on Walter's music. Davine Dial, thank you for handling WPVM-FM in Asheville, North Carolina. And Robin Collier, thank you for managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio in Taos, New Mexico. You can always reach me, Navé, at jamesnavé.com. Navé is spelled N-A-V-E. I'd like to remind you, we're sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing chops, maybe even drop into a free workshop, I host with my creative collaborator, Allegra Houston, every Saturday at noon Eastern Time and every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, imaginativestorm.com, and you can connect with our community. Today, I have a friend of mine on. Her name is Sandi Dittmer, and Sandi is one of our Imaginative Storm stalwart community members. She shows up very often on Saturday to do the work with us. She's a writer. She lives in Alabama, and she's a teacher. And when I say she's a teacher, she recently decided to start facilitating Imaginative Storm writing workshops. And so I'm always curious about what motivates people to teach, not just writing, but teach anything. What is it about the community drive? That's my question that I have always floating around in my head. So, Sandi, welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio.
Hi, it is a joy and just a pleasure to be here. Talking with you today, Navé, it's always a joy.
Well, I've always enjoyed talking to you, so we have plenty to talk about. I would like to start by asking you to just give us a sense of what your writing life is like in Alabama, where you are based. I know a couple of things about what you have going on down there. One, you live out of the country. Two, you're recording this with me on Zoom from your studio. You do a lot of work. You engage with a lot of people, and a lot of people have come on our call because you've recommended it. So I know you're a little bit of an influencer. So give us a sense of what you are about in your community and in your environment. What's motivating you? Why are you showing up every day to do what you do as a writer and a storyteller and an organizer?
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, being a Southerner, we come from rich soil and traditions and storytelling. Maybe it's in the red clay, maybe it's in our blood. Definitely in my DNA to be a storyteller. From my maternal side, my great great grandmother, she raised 10 children. She lived in Clifton, Tennessee, a little tiny holler in Clifton, Tennessee. And the stories of survival and what she did to feed mouths was tremendous. And there's this strong storytelling tradition in our family. Not much of it is written down, but when we get to the dinner table, when we have special occasions, of course, there's going to be stories. And in fact, my great aunt Pat up in Clifton, Tennessee, still there. She has a tremendous amount of stories. And when we get together, we get in her truck. She's in her 80s, and she gets in her F-150, and we just ride around on the family property, and she tells story after story after story. I've started writing them down. Hopefully, we can have a finished piece one day. I come from also a family of creativity entrepreneurs, a lot of ingenuity, creativity. My grandmother was my maternal grandmother. She was a jewelry designer in Florence, Alabama, and which is right by Muscle Shoals. And I know a lot of people have heard about the Fame studio there in Muscle Shoals, and she would create jewelry for the recording artists that would come through. She also did a lot of sewing and ceramics. ended up belly dancing in her 50s just because she wanted some exercise. So I come from a really vibrant family of stories and writing them down. And I love to journal. I think that's always been a part of my journey. And I can remember sitting in an English class in 10th grade, and the assignment was to journal, and it was just to write down your thoughts. There was something about the pen hitting the page for me and this yellow spiral notebook. It was my first journal. There was something magical that happened that I could express my thoughts on paper through this writing device. I felt understood. I could express and not depress my emotions. So that led to finding other ways of creativity in my life. And I remember vividly going to the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, which is in Montgomery, and the Blunts donated this tremendous piece of land and theater. And I can remember sitting there watching one of the first productions of Midsummer Night's Dream and seeing them on stage. And it was just magical that this is possible, to be on stage and to influence people in such a beautiful way. So I thought, well, maybe that's for me. I want to try that. So I ended up studying theater in college. I studied in Birmingham. I ended up with a one-woman show. I performed, I traveled, I performed with ensembles. So I did a good bit of stage work. And then fell in love. I met my husband in Montgomery, and I did some freelance writing at that time and then stopped to raise our 17-year-old now. I do a lot of work of just journaling. We had a family crisis about a year and a half ago where my husband, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 13 years ago and had his second brain surgery about a year and a half ago. And the brain surgery did not go as planned. So immediately I was thrown into the category of not only wife, but care partner. And our tables were just turned upside down. Our finances were not what I thought they were, and a lot was revealed. Our family was in this huge, tumultuous storm.
So that is really interesting. Suddenly you're going along just fine, and the next thing you know, boom, something happens, storm comes, things change. So from a life point of view, people deal with that in all kinds of different ways. So how about you? You're approaching this from an artistic point of view, more creative point of view. You've said your family comes from the entrepreneurial tradition. You've done all kinds of work creatively. So what did you do when that impasse came? How did you deal with it? Where did you gain some strength?
Actually, I'm going to back up to college. When I was studying theater, I also was introduced to Julia Cameron's work in the mid-90s. And my mom actually gave me The Artist Way. And she said, just check this out. It's really fresh, and I think you could really benefit from it. And so I did. And that was just the mid-90s. So I would keep coming back to Artist Way whenever I was feeling dry or whenever I was feeling blocked. I would go back to the Artist Way in different times in my life. Fast forward to 2020. We ended up selling our home in Birmingham and coming out here. We had a great life in Birmingham, very suburbia. Things were clicking, huge community and friends and family. Because of the pandemic, we ended up sheltering out here in the country, and there's some family property out here, and my family is out here, and some property ended up coming up for sale right next to my family. So I immediately was moved from city life to country life, and I was not used to the country. Funny coming from someone raised in Alabama. but I was always in a city. So not only am I out in the woods, it's the pandemic. There's not really many people I could meet with or be creative with. And so I was really hungry. I was very thirsty for some sort of nourishment, creative nourishment. So I said, I think the artist way, there has to be some sort of virtual group. There has to be something in the artist way vein online. So I ended up navigating towards you and your work. And that is how I got connected with you, Navé, and walking through the artist way for 6 weeks, 12 weeks, for 12 weeks, and met a new community of artists from all over the world. And it was invigorating and exciting, and it really helped lift my wings during the pandemic out here in the silence. Because drastic things happened in my life in such a short amount of time, I was grasping for something creative. I was sending up flares for help, and the Imaginative Storm was right there.
So you mentioned the idea of your traditions around storytelling and growing up in the country and growing up in the South, and you have the Tennessee connection, the Alabama connection, and you have that F-150 truck you're riding around in, listening to the stories of the family. Do you remember a story that stuck with you from that ride in the truck? And can you describe a bit of what the truck looks like? It was your grandmother, I think, or your aunt in the truck?
Yes, it's my great aunt Pat. So she was my grandmother's little sister, and my grandmother was older than her, and she took care of my aunt Pat. She was much older, and so my aunt Pat was a baby, and just really protected Aunt Pat before she left home. So there's a real kinship. When my husband and I got married, my Aunt Pat was the one that stood in for us as my grandmother. Now she is almost like the queen bee of Clifton, Tennessee. She sits on her front porch, which is by the Tennessee River, and she watches all the cars go by on the highway. And everybody knows Aunt Pat. And she watches the barges come down the Tennessee River. In her driveway is a big old F-150 truck, and it's got like the side steps that come out. I mean, it's tricked out. And she gets up in there in her Wranglers and big old belt loops and big old belt buckle and crisp button-down shirt, and her hair's always fixed. We all pile up in the truck, and she will drive around. She'll drive down to the family farm where there's actually a sinkhole. There's stories of what all they've put in the sinkhole. Even a Model T, mattresses, trash, anything, and it just absorbs it.
A sinkhole at the family farm. I bet your Aunt Pat knew what was in that sinkhole. Maybe she was responsible for something being tossed down. Who knows? She really sounds like a great character. So your Aunt Pat was your grandmother's little sister. What about your grandmother? What's her story?
Well, there's a funny one about my grandmother who, for Halloween, told my granddad to watch the door for the trick-or-treaters, that she'd be right back. And he was watching a game or something and didn't want to go to the door. So she put on like this sheet over her head and ran around to the front door, rang the doorbell, and he answers the door, of course, has a big old bowl of candy. And he said, "Well, my, aren't you a tall trick-or-treater?" And she doesn't say anything. She just reaches her hand out and scoops all of the candy out of the bowl and right into her trick-or-treating bag. Well, he doesn't know what to say. He's just dumbfounded. He's frozen. He can't say anything. Then my grandmother looks at him, reaches up and grabs him. Grabs him. Well, he is stunned. He is shocked. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know whether to guard himself or guard the bowl, the empty bowl. And he was standing there. Well, she starts teehee, and she just starts laughing. Her shoulders start going up and down, and then he's like, "Well, hell, May," and that was her name, was May.
That's an absolutely terrific story. I can just imagine the guy. His mind is on the game, and he opens the door, and he opens the door to find this very tall ghost. And when the ghost reaches out and grabs him in those places that we can't mention, oh, what a look on his face. Oh, that's so good. So, so good. I also love the story because in the work that I do, people will often come to me and they say they would like to tell their story, but they don't feel like it's good enough or important enough. They discount the ordinary stories that they have. May playing a trick on her husband like that. Fantastic. And I'll bet other people have stories like that as well. You told us a simple story that has a lot of impact we can all identify with because we've all been tricked before by somebody who cares about us, maybe sometimes people who don't care so much about us, but tricked nonetheless. Whatever it is that happens to us becomes our story. And then how do we tell it is what I'm always curious about. And the Southern point of view, the Southern sensibilities. I'm from North Carolina. I say that often on the show, so anybody that's listening knows that I'm from North Carolina. My family goes way, way back. I'm a Southerner, so I know those sensibilities. I don't know if I am a Southerner who was born to tell stories, but I do tend to lean in that direction. It just may be because that's just what people do. So how do you avoid doing it, really?
Right.
Muscle shoals. Tell us a little bit more about Muscle Shoals. I know Doc Watson, I think, might have recorded there, the great Doc Watson, the flat pick player. I love the name Muscle Shoals.
My grandmother that designed jewelry, this was probably in the 70s, rings and all sorts of things, and turquoise. And so a lot of the artists would come into the Time Shop. That's what it was called, right there in Florence. There was one recording artist that came in that she made a piece for that was recording at the Fame Studios. He invited her to the studio for a recording session, and they were recording some song. And then, my mom or my aunt was asking her, well, what was the song? What was it about? And so she said it was something about he stopped loving her or something. He Stopped Loving Her Today by George Jones, and it was George Jones that she had designed the piece for. So lots of fun stories like that of people that would come through. And my mother worked at a restaurant there. She waited tables and to make ends meet. The artist would come in the hotel and come down to the restaurant and get something to eat and then go right back into the studios.
And so to this day, I'll bet some of the jewels she made for the artist are still part of the family heirlooms for these artists. And so there's an enduring legacy there as well, I suspect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have recently started playing around with this imaginative storm writing method as a facilitator. And one of the reasons I'm very curious about learning more from you is because I've been teaching some version of this since, gosh, I don't know, the 90s. So it's been a long, long time. And you're one of the first folks to actually take it on and formally present it using the book Allegra and I wrote, Write What You Don't Know. And you've done it more than once. And you're the only one I know who's ever reported back to me or to Allegra. Other people have mentioned, oh, I did it and it worked out fine. But you've actually formalized it a bit. And so I'm curious from my point of view as somebody that worked hard to develop this idea of write what you don't know, writing 10 steps to writing with confidence, energy, and flow. What's it like to take something like this into the world and circle up 30 people, which is the recent one you did. That's a fair number of people. I saw the picture. I thought, my gosh, that's a lot of folks. There's a lot more that's going on in a circle like that than just presenting the material. All kinds of things can happen. How did it work for you? What happened? Everybody survived. They even praised
Right.
you. They, they, they,
Right.
they loved you, Sandy. They loved you.
It was so fun. I'll back up just a little bit because Imaginative Storm has been the lifeline for me in what I've gone through the last year and a half. And it's been a landing spot for me, and it's a safe space to create in. And so it just resonated so deeply within me, the method. It's so simple, but so profound and so inviting. I can't not talk about it. So I was talking with a friend. She hosted she hosted these artist nights once a week, and people would get together and they would try different mediums. So it could be like concept drawing, is it maybe blind concept drawing or watercolor or, and then one night I was talking so highly of Imaginative Storm that she said, well, come and, do a night for us, do an Imaginative Storm. Tell us about this writing thing you do. And so it's like, well, sure, I'd love to. It's very easy to prepare for. I've done it for, gosh, I don't know how many years I've been hanging out with you guys. So I came prepared and I had some visual prompts, and I walked through the beginning of the workshop, and I just referenced write what you don't know, just did a few activities from that. And all of a sudden, here we go. And they were off to the races. So this was about 15 people one evening, and it was so easy to do. Well, during that process, I'm sitting here and I'm watching, and I'm writing the prompt as well, and I'm watching from a different perspective, which was amazing because I've always been like just focused on my writing, and I've been focused on me doing my activity, right, my portion for 10 minutes. But what I was able to notice with the participants was that I could see clearly their left brain and their right brain fighting, dancing, playing, at war. Some people would be prefacing their work, and I tried to help them, don't preface your work, just read and accept and listen. Well, I could hear and I could see their left brain just fighting their right brain. And it was remarkable because there was this energy that I could see from this different perspective happening, this haze of creativity with the right brain popping up and then the left brain popping up. And this immense amount of compassion came forth in me because I thought, wow, I could see myself in them. And I could really resonate with the right brain and the left brain at war. And then sometimes dancing, twirling together, but mostly fighting together. On my drive home, I was like, what is this? What's going on? And it was almost like my left brain and my right brain had a conversation with each other. The left part of my brain almost was apologizing to my right brain. Like, I am so sorry for being overbearing and being overcritical and stopping you from so many projects or exploring or just being free to create or being curious. And my right brain was saying to my left brain, it's okay. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for keeping me on track, or thank you for helping me stay efficient. So there was this conversation that was going on between my left and right brain that was just resonating from what I saw from this different perspective. Well, of course, that just lit my fire even more to share it. And what's funny to me is that I'm like, well, why haven't more people shared this? Because it's just such a simple method, but it's so incredibly effective. You've got people from all walks of life. You've got people from all different areas of the world. You have people with different levels of experience, and they're all coming together. Like it is a strong enough method to hold the heavy of life, but is also, it can hold the levity of life. And you have this beautiful symphony of play that happens. I think you and Allegra have found lightning in a bottle. It's changed my life, not just my writing life, it has spilled over into my life as a whole. I'm much kinder with myself. I am more creative. I'm a more gentle person, but also there is a strength there that has not been there before. I think seeing creativity as this muscle that needs to be flexed continually. I'm a firm believer that we come from a creator and we are meant to create. And when we don't create, that muscle atrophies. And so by being a part of the Imaginative Storm and showing up on a regular basis, that muscle is flexed and gets stronger and stronger. So not only is it appearing and showing in my writing, it's showing in my life. I will say yes to a tap dancing class. I haven't tapped since I was in college. Why not? It's just fun. I said yes to this podcast. Why not? It can be fun. I am not afraid as much, or I don't let fear scare me away from as many things as it used to, because my rational brain is quieted more by my creative side. It's like my left part of my brain has tried to steer more when my creative part has been a little more atrophied. So my right brain has grown and I feel more of who I was created to be when my right brain is flexing and getting stronger.
You said when you were teaching this work and you were watching the people have the battle between the right and the left brain, you said compassion rose up. What is that all about?
Yeah. We're so hard on ourselves. It was like I saw and I understood the struggle. The condemnation or the critiquing was quieted. Because when something is so small and so infantile or so fragile, like a 10-minute writing, you can't critique 10 minutes of writing. It's just 10 minutes. And why? I just think of a little tiny baby bird that's just hatched. You can't critique that. And so there's more compassion. Let's let this grow. Let's feed it a little more. Let's see how the feathers develop, and let's see how these pages develop, and let's see what this project's going to be. And there's so much more compassion for the little tiny baby bird that you see in little bite size of creativity. I think that's another magical thing about Imaginative Storm is that there are these little tiny sound bites of creativity that spark and pop. Why critique sparking and popping? It's just fun. You just look at it and you enjoy it. Who doesn't love sparklers and fireworks? The Imaginative Storm work for me keeps me grounded in my thoughts. It keeps me grounded in my heart. Therefore, when I face fear out in the world, I have more confidence to say yes to things that I'm afraid of. Fear does inform, that's true, but I don't let it cripple me as much as it used to.
And the people in the class that you taught, how have they responded from the beginning to the end?
I'll start with the second class that I taught. It was a springboard from the first class. The person that asked me to teach the first one said, "Hey, you want to come out here to a retreat? and teach this again. So I get there and talking with some friends that I hadn't seen in a very long time. There's about 65 women at this retreat, and I was one of several options of activities that afternoon. I told my friend, please don't say it is a writing workshop. Please just call it wordplay. We're just going to play with some words. That's it. We're just playing with words. She said, okay. So it was about 5 minutes till we walk in the room, and I'm preparing my head, I'm preparing my heart. If it's only me and my friend Amy and another friend, and we walk through it, just the three of us, we'll be fine. It'll be great. I've never had a bad imaginative storm experience ever. So we walk in the room, and Navé, there were at least 25 women in the room. They were all chattery and they were all excited. And I start. And by the time we had finished, there were 35 people in the room. It was absolutely like herding cats. It was electric. It was exciting. There was so much energy in the room. I felt like I had to lasso them to get them back inside. They even spilled out outside the room when we did breakout sessions because they couldn't hear each other when they read to each other. They couldn't hear each other in one room because they were so chittery chattery. And the several groups had to step out, and it was like fireworks. It was amazing to be able to share something that has meant so much to me, that's been transformative in my life and heart, and to share this with other people was amazing.
And what did they say when they were through with it? And did you get a chance to hear what some of them wrote? And what about the ones who didn't think they could write, didn't have anything to say? I mean, it's wordplay. You kind of fooled them a bit.
I did. I said, you guys, okay, just picture yourself in a sandbox. Everybody, y'all, we're all in a sandbox together. And the sandbox consists of not sand, but words. We're just pulling words up, and it doesn't matter what kind of background you come from. And most of these women, I don't know if any of them were professional writers. They just went in to have fun. There were so many women in the room and so many people. I didn't have time to write for myself, be a participant in the writing portion of it. So I went around and just kind of listened to each little group, groups of 3 and 4, to share. I was able to listen in each group, and some women were laughing hysterically. Some were crying and pouring out their heart. Some were chopping through like soldiers and stringing these delicious garlands of fabulous words. And their reactions afterwards were, I never thought I could do this. I went to a quote writing workshop last weekend with a friend. It did nothing for me. I came here today on a whim, and I cannot wait to get back to the page again. So things like that. People are shocked at what is uncovered with the imaginative storm, because it's these things in the peripheral part of our vision that we don't even know that we carry within us that pop out. One of my writing things that, quote, popped out during one of these imaginative storm experiences when I was participating a Saturday session, I wrote about cotton. So being in the South, there are these beautiful cotton fields that bloom in the fall. And driving back and forth from the country to the city, I've always loved cotton. I don't know why. I could not figure it out. And I went back to this writing prompt, and I don't remember which one it was, but it took me back to a field trip that I took in 4th grade. And what do you do in the 4th grade? In the 70s in Alabama, what field trip do you go on? Well, you go to a farm. You walk through a field of cotton, and you pick the cotton, and you feel the cotton seeds, inside the cotton puffs. And we got to go in the back of a trailer and play in the cotton. And it was wonderful. And it was like I was playing on clouds. We got to take a bag of cotton home, each of us did. So we bring it home, and I have my little bag of cotton, little brown paper bag of cotton that I just stuck in my closet. And then it sat there for a couple of years, and I learned about Alabama history, and I learned about the South, and I learned about what happened with cotton, and I learned about all of these things and all of these people that were so abused and broken because of cotton. So I hid my cotton. It wasn't joyful anymore. It wasn't a cloud. It wasn't happy. It was terrifying. So I was shrouded in shame that I loved cotton. But how can someone in Alabama love cotton, but also love civil rights? So I wrote to this prompt. I did not realize that was in me. I had no idea until this prompt through Imaginative Storm. It was like you describe in Write What You Don't Know, the back part of the lace, what brings lace out, it's the shadow. It's not the actual lace, it's the shadow that we see. This was a shadow in me that I never realized existed. It always resonated. I was driving by these cotton fields, and I told my friend, one of my best friends, I don't know why I love cotton so much. Why do I love cotton so much? And she turned to me and she was like, Sandi, it's a textile. You love textiles. You sew, you knit, you crochet. What do you do right now for a part-time job? You help your sister sew drapes and bedding for interior designers. And so it came full circle, this cotton, this textile, the seed. Then I went back to my great-grandmother who made quilts, and you could feel the cotton seeds in the quilts because the batting, that's how they survived. Primitive stitches in this holler of Tennessee where they made quilts to just survive. And I have a quilt from my mom that my great-grandmother sewed on. My grandmother sewed, has her stitches in it as well. And when my mother was very little, she was climbing around while they were sewing on that quilt. And I have my mom's 5-year-old stitches inside this quilt. So this quilt sits in my room, and it's rolled up, it's wrapped up with this rich history of primitive cotton that has this tragic history, but then also I have this story of my dad. He loves ancestry and found that in one part of our family there were these 10 brothers. This is on my paternal side. These 10 brothers, all of them fought for the Confederate Army, except for one. And one said, I don't believe it's right for one man to own another. And he went to fight for the North. And so you see this cycle of this cycle being broken, the cycle that ownership of another man is not right. And so where does that leave me in my love of cotton? Where is my part in this story, in this Southern story? My part is that I take this history and I sew something new. I create a new quilt. I create new life. I have a 17-year-old that loves equal rights, loves to engage in philosophical ideals, and their friends are from different ethnicities, different parts of the world, different spiritualities. And I can create, as my creator created me, I can create new life and love. I can go downtown, it's about 35 minutes away in Montgomery, to the Rosa Parks Museum. But for me, I can create a new history with the stitches that I now sew and the words that I now put together.
The story you just told is very simple on one level, and yet it's very complicated on another because you have many generations. You have the stitching, you have the daughter, the grandmother, the mother, the cotton, the seeds. Very specific, very detailed, very simple, very complex story. And you're saying that the sense of freedom that you have acquired through the imaginative storm work allows you to feel comfortable easing yourself through this complicated story with some ease. Is that what I'm hearing? I'm hoping that's what happened. I'm trying to put words in your mouth, Sandy.
And then we circle back to compassion. Compassion, why did people feel like that they needed to treat others this way? You have compassion for the abusers and the abused. You have compassion for those who are rescued, those who need to be rescued, and the rescuers. Like it circles back to compassion in this gorgeous story of redemption for me.
So we start out with the imaginative storm ideas saying, well, this is for writers. That's what Allegra and I started with. We're writers. We need to do something here because the pandemic is on us. Let's invent something. And then you come along and say, oh, well, this is not for writing. Let's just play with words, which is true. That's where we are too with it. We're thinking this is more than just about writing. This is something else. In this story, we can see how this sensibility, your fancy's been tickled, and suddenly you have excitement, you have the sparkle, you have the dazzle. Not that you're necessarily writing anything any more dazzling than maybe you were before. The lens is clear. And that's how I feel about this. And I see that playing out in the story that you're telling as well. Are we confirming this? Is that something you can confirm on your end?
I think I've seen Imaginative Storm as, and I hope I'm not stealing anybody's thunder when I say this, because we talked about this before in the group.
Steal as much as you like.
We talked about this the other week in the session about how writers with a capital W, those who've gone through MFA programs, those who have these letters behind their names and these accolades, and there's only one door that you can enter as a writer with a capital W. And if you want to enter the garden, if you want to enter the promised land, if you want to walk through the gate to become a writer, you must come through the front gates. Well, yes, and Imaginative Storm, there's an invitation around the side. There's another gate that opens and makes a way for people to play in the sandbox, for people to enter the garden, or for people to explore and walk around the garden of words.
And the culture has its own set of myths around how we enter these different creative domains. And it is quite true. The official version of many writers does say you have to show up in this fashion. If you don't take these steps, you may not get into the tribe. This is the way we get into the tribe. And one of the things I love about what we're doing, we're exploring language. We're exploring words in this conversation. Writing is one methodology for delivering all of this thinking that we're doing, the way we view the world, the way we see the world, and things glitter and glow and shine, and an insight comes along, and then you jot that insight down. I've said many times to people, I walk and dictate as much as I do anything else. I do write as well. I do sit down and generate material, but there's lots of different ways to do it.
There's so many different ways to express oneself, and words just happen to be one of them. My therapist says, she's like, I would probably get kicked out of the field for saying this, but people should have 7 to 8 different ways to express themselves, different mediums, because when you're able to express those emotions, they're not depressed within you and they are not compacted into these heavy places that cannot be expressed in other places. And we get heavy and laden and stagnant and we stop.
And that's why I love Imaginative Storm, because the stopping comes and then you know that the starting can begin again. And that's the beauty of all of this, which brings us around to the top of our hour. In closing, is there anything you would like to say to folks about Imaginative Storm or what you're up to?
I would invite anyone who's ever thought of joining a Thursday or a Saturday group. They are a professional, kind, generous, inviting group, and it's fresh. And you can create some really fun work, some deep work, and work you never imagined you would create. So don't let fear stop you from joining one of these groups. Because I think, yes, we've been conditioned that this is a quote writer group. I know if I had seen this online and had no connection, no background with the work of Julia Cameron or your work, Navé, and to meet you through Zoom and kind of walk with it, I feel like I kind of came in sideways, sideways on 2 wheels, coming in hot, you know? And I'm so grateful that I did because my life is fuller. I am stronger and I am more open. I don't hold things so tight in my life now. So if anyone out there is thinking of joining on a Thursday or on a Saturday, it's a wonderful group. And you'll walk away having stretched some creative muscles and mining these gems and gold that you never even knew that already existed within inside you.
And the best part, it is a community, it is a gathering, and it only lasts an hour and it's always free. The door is always open. So it's one of those things, folks who maybe struggle a bit with finances and feel like I'd love to have something like this, but I can't afford it. This is just a party with an open door.
Yeah. And it's real. Sometimes you look at things and think, oh, what? That mean nothing's free. This is free.
It's free.
Free. Allegra and Navé, they actually let you know of other things, other projects they have going on, and other ways they could help you.
The rewards are just vast in terms of what we get out of it. And I'm speaking for myself here. So it's just a fantastic thing. Sandi, thank you so much for joining me on this call. I really, really do appreciate it. And we'll do more.
Let's do it. Anything I can do to help.
And there you go, my friends. Thus concludes my conversation with Sandi Dittmer. It was a real pleasure to talk to Sandi about the Imaginative Storm process. You know, like I said in the conversation, Allegra and I have been working on it for 20 years. And prior to that 20 years, I was experimenting with some version of it for 10 years before that. So it's been a long time in developing. And I'm now getting a sense of what it means and how valuable the imagination is for you, for me, for all of us. It's really, really inspiring. And I've also been doing something quite fun in addition to letting my imagination storm around, having words come out and do improvisational work and generative work. I've been walking and memorizing, and I've talked about that a bit on this show. And so I have about 15 poems now that I've recalled. I memorized them years ago, and I've recalled them. And one that I've always enjoyed, I've most especially liked, and I think it fits in really well with the idea of the imaginative storm. People are always asking, well, where do the stories come from? How do I pull a story out of the continuum of my life? How do I make something happen? And of course, something is always going to happen. The question is, what do you do with it when it happens, and how do you participate in that happening? And we're doing this every day. Then the question comes after that. If you want to tell stories about it, if you want to write stories about it, what kind of choices do you make in respect to telling someone who reads what you wrote, what you did in the context of whatever it was that happened? And when it happened, how did you respond to the disturbance of the equilibrium? An air conditioner falls from the second floor and crashes in front of you on the sidewalk. That's a disturbance. What do you do with that air conditioner? If the air conditioner fell and hit you, it'd be a very different kind of disturbance, and it would change the way the story is told. So how do you respond to those things that happen? The disturbance of the equilibrium. What kind of decisions will you make? And if you decide to tell a story about it, how will you tell that story? Where will it begin? Where will it end? What are the obstacles? What are the conflicts? And what are the turning points? And how do you influence those turning points with the decisions you make? I said I've been memorizing or recalling poems. So there's a poem written by Robert Penn Warren I'd like to close with that speaks to those things that happen. And it's titled, Something is Going to Happen. So here it is in closing. Poem by Robert Penn Warren. Something is going to happen. I tell you, I know. I'll tell you. This morning, I saw ice in the bucket. Something is going to happen, and you can't duck it. The way the wind blows is the way the dead leaves go. Something is going to happen. I'm telling you so. Something is going to happen. I declare it. It always happens on days like this, Mother said. No, I didn't make the world or make apples red, but if you're alive, you'll buck up and try and bear it. For this morning the sun rose in the east. I swear it. Something is going to happen. I swear it will. Men have wept watching water flow, and feet move fastest down the old tracks they know. Look how light is lying across that hill. Something is bound to happen today if you don't sit still. Something is going to happen without a doubt. If you aren't careful, it might happen this very minute. Have you ever looked in a drawer and found nothing in it? Have you ever opened your mouth and tried to shout, but something happened and the shout would not come out? Something is going to happen, whatever you say, whether you look out the window or come through the door. Some things will be less and other things more. It's simply no use to turn your head away, for something is bound to happen on a day like today to change everything any which way. For the sound of your name is only a mouthful of air, and the lost and the found can be found or lost anywhere. So to prepare you, there's one more thing I must say. Delight may dawn as the day dawned calmly today. And that, my friends, was Robert Penn Warren's Something is Going to Happen. And indeed, something always does happen. And this show just happened. And now we are at the end. And it's time to say goodbye. So thank you ever so much for listening to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to. And remembering, I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVM LP Asheville 103.7 and streaming online, WPVMFM.org, the voice of Asheville, heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song. WalterParks.com for more on Walter's music. Thank you, Devine Dial, for managing WPVM-FM. I really do appreciate that. And Robin Collier for managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. If you'd like to reach me, Navé at jamesnavé.com. I would love to hear from you. And here's a little aside just before I go. I gave you my email address, Navé at jamesnavé.com, and I invited you to write. I've been producing and airing this show for 9 years. Guess how many times someone has sent me an email? 5 times in 9 years. I seldom get an email 5 times 9 years. I wonder why. I've always been curious about that. So if you are moved to experiment and send me an email just for the fun of it, I think it would be fun because I don't get very many. I'm not deluged with fans. And yet I do bump into people in Asheville and Taos who tell me they listen to the show. And I really, really am thrilled when somebody walks up to me and says, hey, I love the interview with so-and-so. So it's a real pleasure to do this. And even if I never get an email, I'm still going to continue to do it because I have a lot of fire in my belly for this. And I would also enjoy an email if you're so moved to do such a thing. Navé at jamesnavé.com. And on that note, thanks again for tuning in to Twice 5 Miles Radio. I really appreciate it. And hey, come back again very soon. Till then, maybe I'll catch you on that turnaround somewhere down the line.